Hello, my name's Lee Wilson. I'm your host for today's webinar. Today we're going to be taking you through an introduction to RTI as of the legislation in March 2012. This is subject to change, so please keep checking back to the website to make sure if we have any more up-to-date sessions if you are outside of March 2012, as the legislation will be changing all the way through until the RTI is implemented fully in April 2013. Okay, on the screen you'll be able to see our email address for technical support. If you have any technical queries regarding the RTI, please contact us via this email address and include your account number, at which point we will get back to you as quick as we can with a response. Okay, during today's session you will see various points that you may have a question about. Please note that we will endeavour to answer as quick as we can, but there are certain circumstances we're still awaiting clarification from HMRC, or there just isn't a response to just yet. So please feel free, just drop us an email, but we may not be able to answer you straight away. Moving on, the agenda for today is basically an introduction to what is RTI, and then we're going to discuss something called the soft launch, which is your chance as an accountant or agent to get on board early. We're then giving you a demonstration at the end of the session of how Sage have actually implemented the RTI into the software. Okay, so first thing just before we get started is just to give you a little bit of background information with regards to the RTI and the current PAYE scheme. At the moment, the current system, there's around 5 million taxpayers per year who get a repayment or bill after the tax year end has been closed down. And HMRC don't really want that to happen, as you can appreciate, and it's something that they're looking to rectify. Also, there's 1.4 million taxpayers who earn less than £10,000 a year who are actually overpaying tax due to incorrect calculations. HMRC want to try and keep on top of that and make sure people only get the tax deducted they are meant to be deducted. Also, student loans often can be deducted still even though they've been fully repaid, because it takes a while to notify the employer to stop taking the deductions. That's not ideal for those who've been paying them back, so HMRC are trying to look to rectify that as well. And finally, individuals with more than one employment can tend to overpay national insurance because of the way the calculations work. Yet again, that's something HMRC are looking to address. So those 4 different points are all going to come together into RTI to try and simplify the system. Now, at the moment, if we just look at the costs as well, you can see it's not a cheap system to run PAYE for HMRC. So $2.5 billion a year is actually cost just to collect the tax for HMRC. You've got over $500 million costing to employers just to operate it. So just to pay their staff, it's costing over $500 million a year. £1 billion a year spent by HMRC just on administration for tax for the PAYE scheme. And finally, the big figure here is $5 billion a year HMRC estimate is lost every year due to benefit fraud. Now, because of this, there's something coming in October 2013 that you've probably heard of by now called the Universal Credit. This is going to replace the current benefit system, and it's going to be one universal payment paid depending on the situations. And as part of that, HMRC are actually going to amalgamate around 14 databases that they currently use for all the different people's figures into one database. This is the database that will then be used for RTI. So what will happen is HMRC will be notified about every person's payments, so what they're receiving when they're working, and they'll be able to manage that against the benefits to work out if they're getting what they're entitled to, as well as also making sure they're getting the tax and NI deducted that they're meant to be deducted as well. So it's a way of keeping on top of it for HMRC and streamlining the payments made to people claiming benefits. Okay, what is real-time information? So the statement on screen there, ideal way of summing it up, it's a reform of the PAYE system that's going to require employees to make submissions of employee payment and deductions information more regularly. What that actually amounts to is HMRC want to know what you're paying an employee on or before the date you actually pay them. Okay, so under RTI, what will happen is every time you process someone in your software, you'll need to actually update them, and then there's going to be an option within the payroll to fire a payment information off to HMRC. Legislatively, this must be done on or before the date they physically receive the money. Okay, so if it's a weekly paid staff, you'll be doing a weekly submission to HMRC of what you're paying them. If it's monthly, you'll be doing monthly submissions. If it's a mix, you'll be doing a submission every time you pay someone, depending on what frequency they're on. Okay, so it's not just a case of one submission per month or anything like that, it is every time you pay someone. Now, when it comes into effect, as you can see there, in April 2013, there's going to be a mandatory migration period beginning. So what will happen is the employers themselves, not the agents, the employers will actually receive a letter from HMRC saying, on this date we want your initial submission to tell us about your company, so you then start on the RTI itself. Now that will go to the clients, like I mentioned there for you guys. It won't go to you, so you need to communicate with your clients to make them aware that as soon as they get this letter, they must speak to you. Okay, now the actual window of migration is only 6 months, so the HMRC plan to have everyone migrated over by October 2013, so it's in time for the universal credit starting. They're planning to notify the employers with it between 4 to 6 weeks beforehand, so it won't give you time to be aware, but it's just a case of making sure you are fully communicating with your clients so you're aware of it. As you can see on the screen there, we've got a note saying that we're not fully aware how HMRC are going to phase it in, whether it be big companies first or small, or if it's going to be a mix, but we think it's probably going to be by size of employer. Yet again, we don't fully know, but we're going to show you something in a moment called the soft launch, which is going to give you the chance to govern your own dates of going live. Okay, now, what does this mean for employers? Instead of sending once a year submission for payroll year end, so the P35s, employers will actually be required to provide information to HMRC on PAYE and ICA's student loans every time the employee is paid. Okay, so like I mentioned there, you'd have to do a submission every week or every month or however often you pay the employees, so HMRC are aware of it. Okay, now, what does it mean for you as an accountant or an agent? Well, at first we think it's going to impact on how long it takes to run your payroll, because you're going to be basically running a little slow while you get used to the features. There's also going to be a case of you're going to have to make sure the data used in your system is correct and that you've got all the up-to-date details for all the employees, because HMRC will be verifying the details you submit against their database, so you need to make sure that you've got all the correct names, addresses, date of births for the employees going forward, but we'll address data information in a few minutes. Okay, so what we'd recommend as well is that you review the current processes you've got in place at the moment for dealing with your clients, to make sure, for example, collecting timesheets, make sure it's as streamlined as possible, because you want to make sure you can get the information in and get it processed in a timely manner. HMRC will most likely be bringing in fines for late submissions and so on, and if you've got to do 52 submissions a year, you want to make sure you're on top of those, so it is a case of making sure everything's in place before you go live. Also, it's worthwhile speaking to your clients. Just make sure they're aware of what it means to them for you being on RTI. What we actually have is on the Sage Exchange website. There's actually some articles on there about RTI. We've also got letters you can send to your clients about RTI, so they're aware of what's coming. So it's well worth having a read of those and get those downloaded if you'd like to be involved. Okay, this slide here is probably the most important slide of today's session. These are the different dates that were actually that the HMRC have set in stone for the RTI implementation. Okay, in April 2012, HMRC are going live with about 320 employers with RTI itself. They will actually be on site at the employers' practices, processing the payroll with them, so they can see how RTI has been implemented. We are involved in that as well. Some of those customers are Sage customers, so we'll be fully on board and we'll be aware of how that's implemented. So by the time we get to the further on in the launch, our software will be fully ready and we'll know that it's working with RTI. In July, they're going to extend the pilot to another 1,300 employers. Yet again, Sage will be involved in that. HMRC won't be quite as hands-on at that point. It's going to be more the software houses supporting people. But then November 2012 is when the soft launch begins. This is when HMRC are going to migrate around 250,000 employers onto RTI. Now, if you'd like to sign up yourselves or your clients, you can do on the Sage website. There's a link on the Sage Exchange page, and you need to do it by April 20th if you'd like to sign up. This is your chance for you to decide the date you go live with RTI. Now, if you're an agent and you're working for, say, you've got 100 clients, you don't have to sign all 100 up if you don't want to. You can sign just a handful up at the time. It's completely up to you. You can decide who in this window, because it is a voluntary process. Now, with regards to your client's permissions, originally HMRC did want the client to have explicitly say that they want to be involved, but now they've relaxed that stance. So as long as you, as an agent, hold an FBI2 form for that client, you are allowed to say, yes, we want to go live with RTI. Now when you sign up to that website, you can actually go on there and specify a date for all the companies you process for, what date you'd like to go live with RTI. This will still be verified by HMRC, and then they will send the letters to the software houses, who will then pass them on to the agents. So we'll receive your letters and pass them on to you to tell you when HMRC have agreed that you will go live. Okay, now we're expecting to hear back from HMRC by around the end of May, start of June, so you'll have plenty of time to prepare if you're going live in November. That window itself, however, from November to March, isn't the full 5-month window for going live. Because HMRC have actually said that you can't go live in January or February because of the tax year end. So for self-assessment and so on, you can't go live at that point. So there's only really November, December and March you could choose to go live. When you do sign up for RTI for a company, once it has been activated as RTI, you cannot turn off the RTI. So once it's gone on, it's on. Okay, you can't go back, unfortunately. If you choose not to go on the soft launch, or you've got certain clients who you don't go on the soft launch, they will then get the mandatory migration period from April 2013 to October 2013, where the client themselves will receive the letter and need to notify you as the accountant or agent that they need to go live on this date. With regards to going live, in the demo later on, I will actually show you the submission that you need to make to HMRC. It's a very straightforward procedure. It's not much work involved for you, but to be honest, the hard work is before you do the submission, when you make sure the data quality is of a necessary standard for HMRC. Okay, we will address that in the coming slides though. Okay, so what are Sage doing to prepare for RTI? We've been working very closely with HMRC, as you'd imagine, since the concept of RTI was announced. So we've actually gone through different variations of what RTI is going to look like with the HMRC, so until we've got to this current iteration of it. Now, we are participating in the pilots, so of those 320 employers, we are going to be supplying the software for some of those, and as a result, we're going to use all the feedback we get from those sessions to make sure the software is as robust as it can be by the time it goes live in the soft launch. Okay. Also, internally in the Accountants Club, for those of you who ring Accountants Club support, all of our staff will be getting trained on RTI by July at the latest. So those who support Payroll, that is. So you know, we will be fully prepared by the time we go live with the soft launch. Now, what is Sage doing to prepare for RTI? This is basically what the benefits to you for signing up for the RTI itself. Okay, if you sign up for the voluntary migration, the benefits are you're going to become RTI ready before it starts to become mandated. I see that as a brilliant selling point for yourself as a practice. If you've got a competitor in a nearby location who aren't signed up for the RTI soft launch, you can use that to attract customers because you're ahead of the game. You're using software that's clearly is ahead of others as well. You're ready to be RTI compliant. And you've got the experience ahead of others as well. It's a great selling point for yourselves. It's also going to give you a chance in the soft launch window to get used to RTI. One thing we haven't mentioned yet, and this is the ideal time to mention it, is fines for RTI will not be in place in the soft launch window. HMRC will not be fining people for incorrect submissions and such during the soft launch. So if you've submitted some invalid data or you've made mistakes, and lots of mistakes there, HMRC won't be that bothered during the soft launch because it's a teething experiment. If, however, you wait until the mandatory period, if you make mistakes, HMRC may either penalise you or they may contact you for a compliance visit. So it's well worth being involved in the soft launch purely from that perspective, really. Also, you're going to be able to seamlessly move your clients in the RTI world because it's the same program you've used for years. The RTI implementation in Sage Payroll is at the current moment 4 buttons. There's no big difference to the processing there's no difference to the processing at all. It's all done under the hood, like behind the scenes. So it's just certain buttons for the different submissions you need to make. In that case, it's going to be a lot easier for you moving on to RTI in that respect. There's going to be no big change, so no real training needs or anything like that. Okay, we've already mentioned you'll get your practice ready for your competitors, but also during the soft launch, we believe we're going to be able to offer more support to you than if you wait for the mandatory launch, because at the mandatory launch, everyone's going to be going on to the RTI within a 6-month period. In the soft launch, we're not expecting that many people to be going live with the Accounts Club customers, so when you do go live with it, there will be more availability to support you, other than at year end next year when it'll be busy because it's year end. and it'll be busy because there's RTI launch. So we'd recommend trying to get on early, purely so you can get the support while you need it. Now if we move on, preparation for RTI here, the tax year update CD, which you've hopefully all received by now, the final shipping date was the 23rd of March, so if you haven't received it yet, you can actually order it from the Sage website. That's sage.co.uk/PYE. You can go on there and you can reorder your disc, or you can even download it if you need to from there. Or alternatively, give your account manager a call and they'll be able to send you a disc out. Okay, that disc itself is RTI ready. So if you've got a client who is actually registered for RTI, you will get the functionality in the software. Because of this, it's a need that's been brought out by HMRC. As you log into any payroll software, this includes the competitors, not just Sage, the program must be connected to the internet so it can verify if the company you are working for is actually registered for RTI, so it gives you the options you need. Okay, so in that case, anyone who's currently got payroll on a PC that's not got the internet on, unfortunately you're going to need to change your practices there under RTI, as your PC will need an internet connection so it can connect the internet as you sign into the data, and that will then give you the features if you're entitled to them at that moment. So each company will do a check as you log in and give you the features only if that company is registered for RTI at that moment. Okay, because HMRC still haven't fully set the rules down in stone, we are expecting to have to make changes to the software. So in the past, we've had an automatic updates feature in Sage Payroll, but we've never actually needed to use it. But this year, it's been turned on. What we'd recommend is when you install a year-end pack, it does give you the option to enable year-end the automatic updates. Please make sure you do this. This will then allow you to get the automatic updates through as we release them, because there will be updates for the RTI compatibility going forward. Also, with regards to RTI, the way the RTI has been currently implemented is by using the Internet Submissions module that's currently in the software. So the software that currently does the submissions of P35s, year ends and so on, that's been tailored to include RTI. Now, because of that may also have some changes happen if anything changes with the gateway. As a result, what will happen is if you go to do a submission, it may ask you to install an Internet Submissions update. Please agree to install that if prompted. For those of you who have high administrative privileges, or you've got like a network where the administrator doesn't let you install software, please be aware that you may have to speak to whoever deals with the installations more often in the coming months to make sure your payroll program's fully up to date so you can go forward with your processing. Okay, next slide is about quality of data. We've actually got quite a few slides to cover on this one, as it is critical to your data that it's of a high quality to avoid fines from HMRC. I'm going to be showing you some stats and figures over the coming slides, and these are from the 0910 tax year. It's information we've been given by HMRC regarding the submissions. Okay, first thing to mention is that accurate data is absolutely essential for RTI to be successful, as otherwise if you've got incorrect names, addresses, date of births, HMRC won't be able to verify the employees and they won't be able to check their figures. As such, it makes RTI a bit pointless for those people. So it is very important that you speak to your clients and stress to them that you need to confirm all the data you've got for each client. Okay, now you can see there's a did you know there. HMRC state that over 80% of data quality problems are caused by holding incorrect information about an employee's name, date of birth or national insurance number. They estimate the rest of the percentage there, the other 19 or so %, is actually just down to incorrect addresses as well, or no address at all. So we'd recommend basically those are the 4 fields you need to be looking at. Now there's some slight changes with national insurance numbers coming up, but I'll cover that when we get there. Okay, the information you submit to HMRC about your clients every time is going to be matched against the records on their new database. Okay, now as a result of that, they're going to be comparing the full name every time, the full address every time, full date of birth every time, and if you've got it, the full national insurance number. Okay, if they don't match, so if they can't find the person you've entered, so say for example someone's called Robert and you've entered them as Bob, if it can't find them, and that happens quite often, you may be subject to a compliance check from HMRC or a fine. So it is worth being aware of this, because that is one of the big points with RTI going forward. Okay, now what can you do to prepare your clients for RTI? First thing I would say is speak to your clients, stress to them the importance of data quality now. They have to give you the full information. Gone are the days where a client will give you a sheet of paper saying pay this person. this much money and not give you any more information. If it's someone who's new to their business, they must give you their full name, their full address, their full date of birth. Without those, you'll not be able to submit them under RTI without incurring either a compliance check or a fine. Obviously outside the soft launch window there, but it is something that's worth stressing to the employer at this moment in time. Okay, we've got 2 tips on the screen, very useful to read through. Tip 1, familiarise yourself with RTI and take a look at the processes you use with your clients. For example, if they take on new employees to update existing employee information, you've got to double check how they give you the information. You know, are they giving you it as a scrap of paper, or are they giving you correctly typed out with no spelling mistakes? We've got to make sure we get the correct information first time. Also, tip 2, this is the big one for me, communicate with your clients, educate them on RTI and stress them how important that the accurate data is provided. Okay, now we've got a couple of do's and don'ts here with regards to RTI as well. When an employee is new to a business, they should be providing legal documentation, basically as proof of who they are. You as a payroll clerk should either be seeing this information or a copy of it so you know you've got the correct data to put into your software. Okay, now the data we're referring to is either HMRC documentation or DWP documentation. Alternatively, maybe a copy of their passport or a copy of their birth certificate. Ideally, you should also have something with their address on, so maybe some form of like gas bill, electric bill, or something like that that's got a little bit of evidence about who this person is, just so you can make sure all the information you put in the software is correct. What we'd also recommend is in the company information itself in the data that you have all of the following populated. You've got their account office reference in there. You've got their full company name and address. Also that you've got their tax district and reference as well. So we strongly stress that you get all that information and put it in company settings as well, just to make sure it's all correct going forward, because this will be submitted as part of your initial submission to HMRC. The next slide is going back to those facts and figures I mentioned earlier. In 2009-2010, there were over 500 employees called AN Other submitted to HMRC. Okay, it's one of those facts where you see it and it makes you chuckle, but it probably shouldn't, because no one should really be putting in that information. If you process and pay for someone, from the point of view of HMRC, you need their full name. So we've got do's and don'ts there, so do enter their full forename and surname, do enter their double-barreled forename and surname as well. If they've got a middle name, enter it. Basically, if it's on their official documentation, it needs to go in the software for the person. Okay, don't abbreviate names, so if someone likes to be called Bob, but his passport says Robert, or his driver's license says Robert, he needs to go in the software as Robert. Okay, because HMRC will not recognise him as Bob, because they will have his official documentation. Okay, now don't enter initials either. So I always use a real life example at this point. If I have, for example, Samuel L. Jackson, you would need to check what his L stood for, so it's got the correct information in the software there. Because yet again, that may not be validated correctly if you don't populate it. Okay, now dates of birth. In 0910, this is a scary fact, there were over 40 employees who were over 200 years old submitted to HMRC. Now, basically what's happened there is, obviously there's been either a typo, or the person just hasn't known the date and just thought, I'll put it as a really old date. Under RTI, unfortunately, you've got to get the correct date for the person. So that's where the official documentation comes in. Okay, so please, the software will automatically put in the correct format of day, month, yeah, but you must make sure you don't put a fake date in there. Okay, now national insurance numbers. In 0910, there were over 2,000 employees with a national insurance number of AB123456. Okay, now under RTI, the legislation is changing, and if you don't know a national insurance number, there's going to be a way of verifying it via your software. Okay, now as a result of this, we are changing the way the Sage Payroll works by the time the soft launch happens, so you won't be forced to enter a national insurance number in a record if you don't have one. So if you've got someone, say for example a paper boy who you need to put through your payroll, you wouldn't have a national insurance number for them because they'd be under 16, at which point you could leave it blank. At the moment you'll have to put a temporary number in. Okay, now That is a big change because it's always been such an important field, and a lot of people have been surprised when we've told them this, that the NI number is no longer going to be used for validation for a person, because you'd think it would be the unique ID, but because of different scenarios where people won't have them, so they could be under 16, they could be new to the country, there's different scenarios where someone may not genuinely have a national insurance number, at which point we can't use that as a critical field. So HMRC will not be using that as a way of looking someone up. You will, however, be able to check it via your software, but I'll come on to that when we go into the different submission types later on. Okay, so please only enter a national insurance number if it's correct, and don't make up an employee's national insurance number. Don't do a fake one. We've got a link there for the HMRC website. If you go on HMRC's website and just look for data quality, you'll see more information in there. They've got a really useful section on RTI. I would recommend reading that section on a regular basis, as it is changing a lot at the moment. Also, HMRC have a useful YouTube video, so if you go onto YouTube and look for HMRC data quality, you'll find a very useful video there. Okay, the different submission types within Sage 50 Payroll, and well, for any software that's using RTI, are what we're going to just address now. So the first one, this is the initial submission. So when you get your your letter off HMRC saying you need to go live on this date, this is the submission you would make on that date. It's the employer alignment submission. What this does is it submits to HMRC your company information, your list of employees, including their name, date of birth, address, as well as their year to date. That all goes to HMRC, so they can then pick up on those figures and they know where you are at that moment in time in the tax year. Okay, they will use this data you submit to align their records for you. So if you've got, say for example, 105 employees in your system and HMRC think you've only got 100, they will validate the information and update their records, so it's their chance to correct their systems compared to yours. Okay, now they will still already have ideas of people's names, so it is worthwhile making sure the names are correct at this point. Actually, I'd say it's vital that you've got the names correct at this point, but that's just something to be aware of there. Okay, once you've made that submission, you'll not need to do that submission again. Now moving on, this is the submission most people think of when we describe RTI, the full payment submission. In the Sage 50 Payroll software, the biggest change is you're going to have to update the employees before you physically pay them. There are a lot of scenarios where, as agents, you wouldn't update them to the later, as you're probably expecting changes to come through from the employer. That's going to have to change because you've got to update it to do the full payment submission. So what you would do is you'd make your payments, update the records, do your full payment submission, and that would send the information to HMRC. The information it sends is the employee's name, date of birth, address, their pay in the period, so their gross pay, their PAYE, their NIC, student loan deductions, and also the year-to-date values as well. And that will all go to HMRC as part of the submissions. Now, if you've got clients who do their payroll manually, they can still do this manually if they want to. Now, what they would actually do is go on the government gateway and they would type in all those figures for each individual employee, each pay period. So it's a lot of work, but they could technically do it manually if they chose to. Okay, so if you do have any clients who do it manually, please let them know this. It is possible, but you might want to just get them on your books because it'll be easier for them. Okay, now all this information is submitted, and there's been a change in legislation just recently with regards to this, where HMRC are actually going to allow you to make rollbacks if needed, but you wouldn't then resubmit the FPS. What you would do is it would be corrected in the next submission. So if you say, for example, in month 1 you've paid someone £1,000 but it should have been 1,500 and you've already sent the FPS over, you would roll back, reprocess it, then the next month the year-to-dates would be updated and HMRC would be advised of the error. Okay, at the moment that's what HMRC say is acceptable. This is something you would want to check before you go live on the soft launch. Okay, now there's a big note on there at the bottom that's well worth stressing. If an employee is not paid in a period, you must place them on hold before you update all the other people. And they must also be included in the FPS as well. This is something we need to stress to everyone who processes payroll under RTI, as in the past, what's happened is a lot of people have either left them, like not selected the employees and just not updated them for the period, or even, which is worse, updated them as zero pay. You should never update someone with zero pay if you're not paying them, as they could be given a tax refund they're not entitled to at that moment in time. Okay, note at the very bottom of the screen, this submission must be made on or before the date the employee is paid, and it must be run after update records is processed. Okay, just like I've stressed there. The next submission type is the Employer Payment Submission, the EPS. Okay, now if we imagine that we're doing just a monthly payroll, so we've submitted all our figures to HMRC for the tax and NI for the employees and the student loans. What we then would normally do is we'd normally run a P32 and make our payment to HMRC based on that report. Now HMRC at the moment don't have the statutory pay figures included in the FPS, so at this moment in time they wouldn't be aware of what you're withholding for any statutory payments reclaimed. The EPS is their way of finding these figures out. You'd actually use an EPS in the software to basically tell HMRC we've had this much SMP recovered, this much SSP recovered, this much CIS suffered, and you can put all those figures in there so it reduces the amount owed. You would then pay HMRC by your normal payment date, so be it monthly, be it quarterly, whatever it is, you'd pay them as expected. But this is your way of notifying them of the changes. The final two submission types are quite quick to cover. The national insurance verification is your way of verifying employees' national insurance numbers with HMRC. What will happen is you'll select the employees you want to submit and you'd send their information to HMRC, so their name, their date of birth, their address, and what you believe their national insurance number is if you have one in their record. What will happen is within 7 days, HMRC will give you a response via the IR Secure mailbox. So this response will be one of 3 different responses. It'll either be, yeah, the details you have are correct, please keep using them. No, they're not correct, please use this one. Or alternatively, in some scenarios, sorry, we don't know yet. It's going to be basically a case of, for example, if someone's came to work from overseas, they may not yet have been given an NI number, and HMRC can't give you one in that instance. So it's just, it will come through the IR mailbox and you'll be able to apply those changes to the employees. The other option is the earlier year update, the EYU. At this moment in time, we don't know a lot about this. We believe it's going to allow you to inform HMRC about changes to previous tax year figures, but it hasn't been finalised, and as such, it's not included in the Sage Payroll programme. Okay, but once we know about it, you'll know about it. Probably near at the soft launch, we'll have more information on that feature, and we'll have more update webinars online about that, and you'll be able to get more information. Okay, now payroll year end is going to be different under RTI, and that is something we'll be demonstrating in just a couple of minutes there. Under the RTI, you will no longer have to submit a P14 or P35. Okay, so no P14s for the employees and no P35 because all the information is submitted as you go. Okay, however, you will no longer have to submit P38As either for casual workers. The idea is anyone who is paid by your company must be notified back to HMRC via an FPS submission. So if you've got, say, 20 casual workers who work every now and then, you'd have to have them in the payroll as full-time employees, and you'd have to have them on hold and update them each time unless you're actually paying them. Okay, so one thing to mention, the reason you've got to have the employees on hold is if you've got an employee who you just leave on the list but don't update, HMRC will class them as no longer employed by you after either 3 months or 12 weeks, and they will then deregister them from your employment on the system. So you need to make sure they're on hold, because if they're on hold, it'll tell HMRC, this person's here but they're not working for me at this moment in time, and HMRC are happy with that. Okay, now what you will have to continue doing under RTI is you will still need to provide your employees with P60s going forward. We expect that to change in the coming years, but at this moment in time HMRC want it to still be there. And you will still have to do P11Ds or P11Ds for taxable benefits, because that won't be included in your RTI submissions. The new change is you'll do your final full payment submission, so your final FPS, and then you'll have to do a little declaration in the software to HMRC. For those of you who are familiar with the year end at the moment, when you do a P35, you've got questions at the start of the wizard which form P35 parts 3, 4 and 5. You basically do those questions in the software and they are submitted to HMRC. So basically the type of business you are you a service company, have you made payments to a school, that sort of thing. Those little submission questions are the ones that are sent as part of your year-end procedure. The year-end itself now, it's about a 2-minute job per company, as opposed to what it was previously, where you had to sit and reconcile all your figures. So it's a lot more streamlined, and yet again, I will show you that as the final part of the demo today. Okay, the final thing to mention is multi-company RTI submissions. For those of you who use multi-company tasks, you'll be pleased to hear you can now do FPS submissions via multi-company tasks. For those of you who don't use it, it's a very useful feature that allows you to do tasks in your database across multiple companies. So, for example, I could go in and I can, as you can probably see on the screenshot there, I can update my e-submission settings across multiple data sets from that one window. So instead of me having to go into each data set by myself and update them, I can do it in one screen and it applies it to all the companies for me. Alternatively, I can do an FPS across all my data sets as well now. It's going to be a great time saver. At that point, I'm going to show you my payroll program, and we'll go into the demo itself. Okay, so you can see on the screen I've got all my employees there. We're in the new payroll software. I've got my process date at the bottom of the screen is 30th of April, so I'm going to pretend that I'm on the very first launch with HMRC. Okay, now the data I'm in, I'll just show you my version number. So within Helping About, at this moment in time, I have the normal year-end disk installed, so 18.00.031. And I'm also licensed for that version as well. So you can see I'm on the fully up-to-date version, which most of you will already have by now as well. Okay. First thing to mention is if we pretend that I've been told I have to do my employer alignment submission at this moment in time. If I go to e-submissions at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice that there are new options within here for the RTI options. Okay, and I've got normal e-submission settings, which if we look in there, I can see I've got my e-submission settings already configured. These are the same as they've always been. They're not going to change for the RTI. Got my IR mailbox, which is where I'll get a notification of NI changes and such. But I've then got my employer alignment submission. So if I click on that, it builds the information it needs for me, and it then comes up with my Internet Submissions module. For those of you who've used the software before, you will be familiar with the screen already. I say continue to the first screen, which is just my legal disclaimer, and it then gets me to confirm my e-submission details. I'll say submit, and it then warns me that I've got an employee here with invalid characters. So for example, I've got a person called AN Other. I just wanted to put that demo in there based on the information we had earlier, and it's actually removing the invalid characters because I've got dots in his name. If I click continue, it's actually got them still in there, but it will submit just the correct information for me. Now, it shows me a list of who it's about to submit to HMRC. This is my final chance to confirm all my information is correct. If I look on this list, I can immediately see lots of names that would most likely need changing before I go live really with RTI. For example, Fred is most likely Frederick. Herman, is it Herman with an I or would it be Herman with an A? AN Other should be the full person's name. So for example, it could be Anthony Norbert Other or something along those lines. I would have to have the correct names in, not just initials. Director would most likely be called Diane or something along those lines. I would make sure all these names are correct before I do the submission, because if I'm not on the soft launch or one of the early pilots, this would be a fines due here or compliance checks. If I do submit, it sends that information to HMRC. Now I am using the dummy gateway here at the moment, so I will get different response times compared to yourselves. Okay, I'm not really using the live server, so it's sometimes a lot quicker because of that. But when it goes through, I get the normal submission screen that you receive. So I get a click here and I get my correlation ID. I also get my submission date and time, and I can print this as my evidence that I've done my submission of my EAS. Once I've done that and I'm happy, however, I'm now ready to process my payroll like normal. So if I go into payroll there, what we'll do is I'm just going to process these 6 employees. So if I highlight them all first, and we'll go down to payments. So go in there, I'm just going to save all the way through each employee. So I'm happy with their figures. Okay, so they're all saved. What I would now do is I would print the pay slips if I wanted them. I'm not going to in this instance though. I'm just going to update them. So go through and I just update my employees, and they've now been updated. So all 6 are there. I'm now ready to use this new option underneath Update Records for my full payment submission. If I do that, we get the Internet Submissions module again. I'll say continue to the initial statement, and I can then submit when I'm happy with my data. It warns me yet again that I've got that person's name incorrect. I really should go and correct that at some point, and I'll say continue. Lists who I'm going to submit to HMRC, and I say submit. That then sends the information over to HMRC for my full payment submission for the period I've just done. Okay, it's important that you remember to do this for every period that you process, and it's always before they physically receive the money. Okay, yet again, I get the option to click here and I can see my receipt of the submission. I would strongly urge you to keep a copy of that in some way just to make sure you've got it. Okay, but if I close out of there, we've now done our submission. Okay, that's the end of month 1. What I'd now do is I'd go and run a P32. Okay, so I can see if I've got any statutory payments or anything like that that I need to be aware of. So I go into reports in the period end, and I've got my P32 here. Now, one thing worth noting that for accountants and agents who process payroll on behalf of others, we're actually going to be releasing a new copy of the P32 in coming months via an automatic update, which is going to be a P32 verification report. You will be able to run this report in the software and give it to your client. There will be fields for your clients to sign to authorize the figures, to basically say they're happy with the figures you've entered, and basically take the liability off yourselves, put it on the client's shoulders. Okay, but if I run the P32 for the moment, and I'm going to do it just for month 1, because we'd never recommend run the P32 for more than 1 month at a time. But if I do for month 1 here, what we'll get is my P32 on the screen. Now, unfortunately, in this case, I haven't actually got any statutory payments, but if I did, I would now go and put this in my EPS. At this point, I need to go and do my EPS just to notify HMRC that there are no changes to be made to the figure, so I actually owe them this figure at the end here at number 16. Now, to do my EPS, I go into the employee option, and I'm not employee, sorry, e-submissions, and I do my employer payment summary option. So it just gives me a wizard at this point. When I walk through it, I can see the different options for the different types. Now, at the moment, it hasn't populated with the zeros automatically until I've clicked in the boxes. That's because it is still an early iteration of the RTI features themselves. By the time it's released, these will populate themselves. Okay, if I needed to, I would populate these figures as appropriate. But when I say next from the statutory payments, I get to put in if I've received any funds from Revenue and Customs for statutory payments. If I click on that button, it actually takes me into the company settings window. And also I've got the figures for funds received from revenue for refund of tax if I have received money back. I also have the field here if I've had CIS deductions suffered, so I can notify HMRC of that for this period. In this case, I'll say I've had £100 deducted. Let's say next, I then get finish, and I get the Internet Submissions module again. So if I go through these steps, it just confirms just general information about my company here, not the figures submitted. I press submit, and that will then send the information over to HMRC. Okay, so that is the EPS, which is step 3, okay, which you would do on a monthly basis. It's gone through. Yet again, I get my receipt, which I can print off and keep a copy of if I want to. The final type to show you is the NI verification. Now, in this current build, I can only do this for 1 employee, but by the time it's released, you will be able to do this for multiple people. I'll highlight Fred on the list, and I'll choose the NI verification. In the Internet Submissions module that comes up, I get the same options you've seen already. So just basically click all the way through. It shows me the one person I'm going to submit and gives me the current NI number that's in there. When I submit that, it goes over to HMRC. They will then process it within 7 days and give me a response via my IR Secure mailbox. And that response will be one of 3 things. Either keep it as it is, change it to this, or we do not know what this person's NI number is, keep it blank. Okay, that is it with regards to the implementation of RTI in the software. Next thing I'll show you is just the year end itself under RTI. For those of you who do a lot of year ends, you'll probably be familiar. If we go into the Wizard, my Wizard's at the top of the screen, and then Payroll year end, you'll notice there's no option for P35 on this list firstly, but when I'm in there, I'm just going to say yes to the criteria boxes to get me in here. You can see I'm doing 1213 tax year. When I get into the software, I've only got 8 options now. There used to be 11. Okay, the first option is to take a backup. The next is to print and check my P11s. Okay, for that we've got the check data button at the top, which will do most of the work for you. So I'd recommend checking that. We also have a webinar online for just a normal year end. It's well worth having a view of that if you can, which will walk you through the normal steps of how to check your reports and such as well. We've then got step 3, which is end of year declarations. If I click on that, I get my wizard. Okay, these are the questions you'd normally get at the start of your P35 wizard in the current software. Okay, so question 1, did I make any free of tax payments to an employee? So I'd say yes if I have. So far as you know, did anyone else pay expenses or in any way provide vouchers or benefits to any of your employees whilst they're employed by you? So no. Did anyone employed by a person or company outside the UK work for you in the UK for more than 30 days in a row? Have you paid any of an employee's pay to someone other than an employee, for example a school? And are you a service company? Once I've answered those, it then asks me if I need to submit a P11D or P11DB. So I'd say it's not due. It gets to confirm my pension contracting out certificate, and that is it. That's all I have to do at year end. Okay, once I've done that, I can then do my net submission. This will send the information over to HMRC just to tell them about my company information I'm submitting. Okay, I'll send that over. This is the equivalent of you submitting your P35s and P14s at the moment, and P38As if you have one. But the information goes over to HMRC. I can then print my submission log if I want to, so I've got a record of that. And once I've done that, I can then produce my P60s just like normal, complete the year end, and then take a final backup. And that is the year end on RTI. Okay, I hope that has been a useful session for you there. The final thing to mention is our email address again. If you do have any questions regarding the RTI itself and you can't find it on the HMRC website or you just want to chat to someone about it, please drop us an email at acpriority.link@sage.com, but also please remember to include your account number so we can actually address the call as quick as we can. Alright, but thank you for your time and I hope that was useful.